this video, I want to show you how to make different kinds of pumpkins using different shapes, patterns, traditional jack-o'-lantern faces, but using crayons and watercolor instead. I'll even show you how to use washable markers that you can use as paint as well. So say I want to make a really tall pumpkin. The first thing I do is I make a really tall letter C. You might want to use a pencil to practice first, or you can dive right in with your crayon if you'd like. So to get myself started, I'm going to draw a really tall letter C. But to finish my other half of the pumpkin, I need to draw a backwards C. And it is okay if your C's are not perfect. Pumpkins are often lopsided and imperfect, so don't worry about that. Next, I need to add the ridges or the bumpy lines to my pumpkin. To do that, I'm going to start back at the top where my C's meet, and I'm going to continue using that C shape and stop at the bottom where my C's meet. I'm going to draw a backwards letter C and keep going until I cannot draw any more ridge lines. The next thing I need to add is the stem for my pumpkin. I could even go in and add a pattern. You can choose your own pattern. You don't have to do polka dots like me. This is just one idea. If you have watercolor and you are trying this new technique, which is called watercolor resist, you need to make sure that you press down kind of hard with your crayons. If you draw too lightly, then the paint will cover up your crayon and you won't be able to see it. So here I have drawn my pumpkin with my blue crayon. You could pick any color of your choice. And now I'm going to get my water ready, paintbrush, and pick some colors to show you how this works. So I've drawn with blue crayon. I'm going to get some yellow. And to remember, to make watercolor work, you need to dip your paintbrush in water and then mix the water with your paint. And now I can go over and I can still see my crayon. And as you can see, the water is starting to move away from some of my crayon lines. But I can also pick other colors as well and kind of start mixing them together. Always, always, always clean your paintbrush before you go to a new color. I didn't press very hard on my polka dots, but luckily you can still see them. But my lines on my pumpkin really, really stand out. And you can see the wax from the crayon and the water that I'm using to activate my watercolor paint do not like each other. So wax and water are not friends, but they do make some really, really cool art. And all that's left is to let your pumpkin dry. So that's how you could do a really tall pumpkin. But what if you want to make a really short, maybe more traditional looking pumpkin? Let's set this off to the side, let that dry. So my paper for my tall pumpkin was vertical. I'm going to turn my paper horizontal, move that over, turn my paper horizontal to make a shorter pumpkin. For a shorter pumpkin, let me get another crayon color. Maybe let's use red. I'm going to make a shorter C and wider. All right, and again, we do not need to worry about making our pumpkin the same on both sides. As always, sometimes they make a really funny design. So here I've got my regular C and my backward C. This is where you could add in a traditional jack-o'-lantern face. I would draw that before you draw the bumpy lines, the ridges of your pumpkin. And if I'm going too fast, you can always pause my video, finish up what you're drawing on, and hit play again. So I'm just going to color inside. And you can decide if you want to add in the lines of the pumpkin, or you can leave it plain. That is up to you. You don't have to, especially if you leave a bump at the top for your stem. And people will get the idea that this is a pumpkin. If you want to add the ridges, again, you need to start at the top in the middle and finish at the bottom. And since we've already drawn our face, what you would do is stop and pick it back up at the bottom. But since we colored it, we can draw through it. And there we have our pumpkin. And again, making sure that you've pressed pretty hard while coloring. Otherwise, the paint will take over and you won't be able to see your crayon. So again, I'm going to clean my brush, find a new color. Who says pumpkins have to be orange, right? And you can see the paint is moving away from the crayon. It disappears. It's kind of like magic. One of my favorite things to do. And don't worry if that bothers you, you can kind of wipe it off if it's sticking to the crayon a little bit, but don't worry. I don't think anybody will mind. So that's another pumpkin idea. If you don't have watercolor, but you do have a random paintbrush and markers, there is a way that you can paint with traditional markers. Let me grab some here. I think what I will do first, yeah, all right. So say I want to make, let's see, I might not add a face to this one yet, but let's say we make another tall pumpkin. Another way that you can make a pumpkin without using the C's is just to remember that pumpkins are bumpy at the top and at the bottom. So you can kind of create your own oval shape, just remembering to put 2 bumps at the top, so that way you can add your stem, and a bump at the bottom, since that's kind of how pumpkins are shaped. And then from here, you could continue to add those lines. And maybe add in another color. So I'm not going to color in with my markers, and I will show you why. I'm just going to outline. And if you are using markers, always use your lightest color first and then your darker colors, so that way you don't ruin and mix them together. So now I've got my markers. Let's see what this does. I'm not going to color in because I won't be able to get that watercolor effect if I color the whole thing in. So I just outlined it or drew it like we would with a pencil or a crayon. And now I'm going to have water on my paintbrush and start to paint the water over my markers. And now it's kind of giving me that really cool watercolor effect without having to have watercolor paints. Something cool you can do on your own. Now, if you want to add a pumpkin face to this, all you need to do is let it dry, and then you can use crayons or markers to draw your face on top of that pumpkin. I hope you enjoyed this, and I can't wait to see what you create.